At 15 times the speed of sound, the interceptor arrives to an empty patch of sky. While official briefings claimed defenses were holding, Iran launched the Fattah-2, a weapon that simply breaks the rules. It doesn't fly a predictable arc. By the time your defense system calculates its trajectory, the missile is already somewhere else. Multi-billion-dollar platforms, Patriot, Fateh, are rendered physically incapable of stopping it. This creates a terrifying new reality. Every critical US and Israeli asset in the region is now completely defenseless. This event is not just a military failure, it is a fundamental repricing of global risk. This analysis provides the framework to understand what that means for your capital. But this strike wasn't a singular event. It was the calculated end of a masterfully executed plan. What we just witnessed was the beginning of Phase 3. But that final, unstoppable strike, that wasn't Phase 1. That was the culmination. That was Phase 3. To understand how a superpower was checkmated, you have to look at this not as a battle, but as an engineering problem. A problem that was solved with a brutal and brilliant three-stage design. Stage 1 was about depletion. It wasn't about destroying military targets. It was an attack on the enemy's balance sheet. Iran launched waves of cheap drones, costing maybe a few $1,000s apiece for the sole purpose of being shot down, because each interception forced the expenditure of a $3 to $4 million Patriot missile, or a $12 million Fateh interceptor. The math is unsustainable. In just the first 5 days of this engagement, US-supplied systems burned through over $2.4 billion worth of Patriot missiles. You cannot win a war of attrition when your defensive ammunition costs 1,000 times more than the enemy's attack. Once the arsenals were thinned, and analysis from CSIS confirms that key interceptor stockpiles were already critically low from prior engagements, Stage 2 began. The blinding. With a depleted defensive screen, more valuable munitions could be used to systematically target the eyes and ears of the network. The sophisticated radar installations, the command and control centers. You sever the nervous system, creating calculated windows of total blindness in what was once presented as an impenetrable shield. And only then, only when the system was economically drained and functionally blind, did Phase 3 commence. The kill shot. The hypersonic weapon wasn't launched against a defense network at full strength. It was launched into a carefully manufactured vacuum of vulnerability. At that point, its theoretical invincibility was almost secondary. The system designed to stop it was already defeated before it ever left the launch rail. This is a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. It proves that a lesser power can dismantle a superpower by attacking its economic and logistical architecture. But to assume this military humiliation was the end goal is to fundamentally misunderstand the scale of what is happening. The strikes were devastating, yes, but they were also a necessary precondition. The real target wasn't on the ground at all. It was something far more fundamental. That fundamental target was the very nervous system of American power itself, the digital architecture that underpins its military, financial, and commercial presence in the region. While some of the hypersonic warheads did precisely what was expected, punching through 100-foot deep reinforced concrete bunkers to neutralize hardened leadership targets, others signaled a terrifying escalation. Imagine the quiet, climate-controlled sterility of a massive Amazon Web Services data center in the Gulf. Not a battlefield, but a cathedral of modern commerce, humming silently with the flow of global data. Then, in an instant, that hum is replaced by the concussion of an explosion. The cold air fills with fire and the acrid smell of melted silicon. This is where the nature of the conflict fundamentally changed. As Reuters and Bloomberg would later confirm, in March 2026, coordinated drone strikes had hit 2 AWS data centers in the UAE and damaged a third in Bahrain. This wasn't a stray missile. It was a declaration, a statement that this war was now total. The message was brutally clear. The front line was no longer a trench in the sand. It was the server rack that processes financial transactions and routes military logistics. This was never about winning a single battle. It was about the systematic, undeniable dismantling of a nation's influence. And as the smoke cleared from the ruins of those data centers, the physical destruction was self-evident. But then the official statements began to emerge, and it became clear that another war was just beginning. A war over reality itself. And that war over reality began almost immediately. It's a conflict fought with press releases and official statements, and the objective is to create a gap between what they tell you and what the data confirms. First, they tell you about casualties. In early March 2026, US CENTCOM statements spoke of single-digit losses, 6 service members, but we have confirmation of entire fully manned bases taking multiple direct hits from precision weapons. The math simply does not add up. On the other side, Iran was claiming over 650 American casualties. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, but the sheer scale of that gap tells you everything. Then, they tell you Iran's missile capabilities are being successfully degraded. This is the classic script, projecting victory to manage domestic opinion, a pattern we've seen in countless other conflicts. But just days after these claims, the world saw the Fattah-2 in action. This isn't just spin, it's a deliberate distortion of reality. And for anyone looking at the hard data, it shatters trust, but the most dangerous part isn't the lie itself. The danger is that this distorted reality, designed for screens back home, is being broadcast to the entire world. And other nations are watching. They are listening, and they are making their own calculations based on a reality that simply isn't true. And the first, most catastrophic miscalculation came from a continent already on its knees. Europe. Still reeling from the cut-off of Russian gas, the disruption in the Persian Gulf was a second, knockout blow. This wasn't a strategic choice. It was a panicked, reactive spasm. A desperate move, born from the visceral fear of the lights going out and entire economies grinding to a halt. So, they made a fateful decision. As Defense News reported that March, a coalition of desperation formed. Italy, France, the UK. They deployed their naval assets to the eastern Mediterranean. We saw the French Charles de Gaulle carrier group and the British destroyer HMS Dragon steaming towards the conflict. A show of force, or so they thought. Iran's response was swift and chilling. Any nation's military entering the declared conflict zone would be treated as a combatant. Suddenly, these proud European warships were potential targets. The math was simple. These were billion-dollar assets, sailing into a kill box where the established laws of naval defense no longer applied. They were just as vulnerable to the same hypersonic weapons that had already proven effective. A regional fire was now a global contagion. NATO members were being drawn in, one by one, and from the sidelines, Moscow was silent, watching its rivals overextend themselves, bleeding resources and credibility. But this escalation wasn't chaos. It followed a chillingly precise script. A playbook written not in Tehran, but forged decades earlier in the mind of a young officer watching his own superpower disintegrate. To understand how the West walked directly into this trap, we have to understand the foundational trauma that shaped the worldview of Vladimir Putin. The scene is Dresden, East Germany. December 1989. A young KGB lieutenant colonel stands inside his bureau, listening to the roar of a crowd outside. They've just stormed the headquarters of the Stasi, the dreaded secret police, right next door. He knows his building is next. He gets on the phone to the local Red Army tank division, requesting orders, requesting protection. The line on the other end is quiet for a moment. Then comes the reply that will define the rest of his life and reshape the 21st century. We cannot do anything without orders from Moscow, and Moscow is silent. In that moment, an entire reality collapsed. The mighty Soviet war machine, the guarantor of an empire, was nothing more than a voice on a phone admitting total paralysis. He was alone, abandoned. He walked out to face the crowd himself, bluffing that his men were inside with orders to shoot, and somehow it worked. But the lesson was burned into his mind. The system he served was a hollow shell. What followed that personal humiliation was a national one, the total geopolitical and economic collapse of the Soviet Union. Putin would later call it the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. In 1992, hyperinflation in Russia topped 2,500%. A superpower was reduced to ruin and international irrelevance. So when he finally rose to power, his mission was a direct, cold-blooded response to that memory. It was to ensure Russia could never, ever be humbled like that again. He didn't try to outbuild America ship for ship, or tank for tank. He knew that was a fool's errand. Instead, he analyzed the system of American hegemony and identified its central pillar, the illusion of invincibility, projected by its carrier strike groups and its missile defense shields. His response was pure asymmetric logic. Pour every available resource into weapons designed for one purpose, to make that shield obsolete. In 2018, he stood before the world and laid his cards on the table. He announced the Avant-Garde, a hypersonic glide vehicle that could travel at over 20 times the speed of sound. He unveiled the Kinjal, an air-launched missile that no defense system could intercept. He said, "We have created weapons that have no analogues anywhere in the world." This is the playbook of the humiliated. How a deposed power restores its sovereignty by creating a weapon the hegemon cannot stop. And as Iran demonstrated this exact playbook in the waters of the Persian Gulf, a chilling realization began to dawn in the palaces of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. If the American shield is an illusion, what is their protection truly worth? The answer to that question wasn't delivered on a battlefield. It was delivered through quiet, encrypted diplomatic channels. The most significant consequence of Iran's success was not military, but political. For 40 years, the security of the Gulf states was underwritten by a pact with the United States. Now, that pact was collapsing under the weight of a single, cold, pragmatic conclusion. Imagine the secure video calls between Riyadh and Washington. The public statements spoke of ironclad alliances. But the private message, as reporting from outlets like PBS and Foreign Policy later confirmed, was one of profound frustration. The American military presence, meant to guarantee their security, was now the very thing attracting devastating attacks to their soil. The protector had become the target. The message was brutally clear. The bases that were supposed to deter aggression have instead attracted it. Get them out. When the security guarantee faced its ultimate test, it failed. And with that failure, a fundamental realignment of power in the Middle East was set in motion. But this entire tectonic shift, the end of the American era in the Middle East, the rise of a new power dynamic, the repricing of global risk, It can all be traced back to one single fact. A fact so simple, yet so powerful, that it renders every aircraft carrier, every military budget, and every political promise almost irrelevant. And that is what we need to understand next. Iran is fighting America and Israel simultaneously, entirely alone. And it is winning. That is the single most important fact of this entire conflict. It's a reality being watched in real time by every nation in the so-called Global South. 57 other Muslim nations with all their armies and wealth stood on the sidelines and simply watched. Iran proved it didn't need them. That realization is the sentence that changes the next 50 years of history. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, a regional power has demonstrated that it can single-handedly defy and defeat the American hyperpower and its primary ally. The spell is broken. The math has changed. Right now, every head of state, every finance minister, every general is recalculating what a US security alliance is actually worth. In a world where hypersonic weapons can bypass any known defense, what does a reliable security partnership even mean anymore? What is the new risk calculus? Share your analysis below. But this geopolitical recalculation isn't just an abstract exercise for think tanks. It has a price, and that price is already being factored into the assets you hold, the energy you buy, and the value of your currency. So, the question now becomes intensely personal. How does this new map of global power translate into the new map of your wealth? The translation is not abstract. It's a number. A permanent risk premium now priced into the global economy, and by extension, into your life. First, the immediate shock. The Strait of Hormuz is the channel for 20% of global oil supply. Following the disruption, the market reaction was violent and predictable. In the first week of March 2026, Brent crude futures surged past $85 a barrel, a 20% rise in a single week. Analysts at Goldman Sachs were precise. They calculated that traders were embedding a $14 per barrel risk premium directly attributable to the conflict. But this is where the official narrative of a temporary spike diverges from reality. This isn't a fleeting event. The demonstrated vulnerability of naval assets in the Strait has fundamentally and permanently repriced risk. Traders now know this channel can be closed. They know the shield is broken. That knowledge doesn't disappear. It is now a permanent variable in every energy trade, a sustained tax on global commerce. This translates directly into the everything rises problem. JP Morgan forecast already warn of an added Europe 3.5 to 0.8% to the global inflation rate just from this energy pass-through. Their projections show oil reaching $100 to $120 per barrel if disruptions are prolonged. While strategists in Washington talk about denying territory in the Gulf, the math on the ground is simpler. In the United States, the price of gasoline rose 11 cents per gallon nationally. That is the direct transmission line from a missile in the Gulf to the price you pay at the pump. It's the increased fuel cost for your trucks, the higher shipping price for your business's parts, and the corrosive inflation that is actively eroding the real dollar returns on your 401k. The conflict is not over there. Its front line is your balance sheet. This new economic reality is unsustainable. The political pressure it creates is immense, and it all leads to the final critical question. How does this all end? The answer is not found on a battlefield. It's found in the cold, hard math of domestic politics and a decision that has now become inevitable. This war doesn't conclude with a treaty signing on the deck of a battleship or a victory parade through a conquered city. It ends when the political math in Washington finally changes. The breaking point is reached when the economic pain becomes politically unbearable for whichever administration is in power. The sustained inflation, the permanent risk premium baked into energy, the drain on capital from a global military footing, all of it creates a domestic political crisis. The pressure becomes immense. It ends when the domestic opposition grows too loud to ignore, and when former allies in the Gulf, securing their own economic futures, publicly demand that all US forces leave their territory. That is the final signal. Forced by this undeniable reality, Washington will be compelled to withdraw its forces from the region. The official statements will speak of a strategic repositioning or a pivot to face new challenges. But it will be the quiet confirmation of a new geopolitical truth. It will be the dawn of a new, multipolar reality that was forced not by military might alone, but by the cold, hard math of economics. If this analysis provided you with an unfiltered framework to understand the new risk calculus, subscribe and hit the bell for more breakdowns that connect the dots between geopolitics and your capital.